From the 11 Alive studios, this is The Georgia Vote with Faith Jesse and Zach Merchant.
Welcome into The Georgia Vote. Faith is off this week. Our one-on-one interview with Georgia Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is just about a minute away. But first, it was another busy week in the world of politics. Georgians, of course, were center stage during a budget hearing on Capitol Hill this week. Former Congressman Doug Collins, President Trump's Secretary of Veterans Affairs, faced questions from multiple senators, including Democrat Jon Ossoff. Ossoff drilled down on staffing shortages at the Atlanta VA. He quoted an Inspector General's report listing more than 200 primary care vacancies, and that includes nurses and pharmacists. The senator asked Collins for a timeline on when these vacancies might be filled.
And the wait times, as you know, in Atlanta are a particular issue. Of course, there are wait times at other facilities as well. But I appreciate your ambition.
There's nothing stopping.
I appreciate the ambition of as soon as possible. But I'd like to know. I mean, we'd like to work toward a deadline. So can you give me a date by which you'd like to ensure the Atlanta VA is fully staffed?
Well, Senator, I think you know that that's not something I can give you, but I'd be happy to do a health fair with you, and I'd come down and you and I could recruit these workers.
Well, I tell you what, why don't you?
I'd be happy. I mean, we'd be happy to do. I'm not trying to be funny here.
I want to do
this.
I'd love to work with you. I'd love to work with you to make sure we recruit those health care workers.
As for that deadline requested by Senator Ossoff, Secretary Collins says he will work towards giving the committee a target date once he talks with staff at the Atlanta VA. Meanwhile, DeKalb County charges against a journalist arrested during an immigration protest will not move forward. Mario Guevara was detained 2 weeks ago on Chamblee Tucker Road. Officers say he refused to stay out of the street. Wednesday, the DeKalb County Solicitor General said that there was probable cause to support the initial arrest, but there was not enough evidence to sustain a prosecution beyond a reasonable doubt. Guevara still faces other charges in Gwinnett County. The American airstrike on Iranian nuclear sites last weekend exposed some differing views among usually close Republican allies. President Donald Trump authorized the strike and called it a success. But his close supporter, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, has argued the U.S. military should have never been involved. This week, I asked her about her stance. You have been vocal in your opposition to the American strike on Iran. Why are you opposed to this?
Well, this has been a stance that I've taken literally since the beginning of serving in Congress. I've been against American troops, American hard-earned taxpayer dollars being thrown into foreign wars and foreign conflicts and regime change. And I think we have so many problems here in America. Our debt, for example, is $37 trillion. And in particular, Gen Z, that's my kids' generation. They're 22, 25, and 27. That generation can hardly afford to pay rent month after month. They can't afford to buy a house. Insurance is so high they can hardly afford it. They really want good paying jobs and they're hard to find. And I think those are the issues we need to remain focused on.
At what point would you change your stance? And I guess a better way to frame this would be, what kind of situation would lead you to support foreign military intervention?
Well, that would involve an attack on our homeland. And I've been very open and honest about this. You know, the most dangerous threat to Americans are the people in our home state are threatened, and people all across America are threatened every single day by illegal drug trafficking across our border, illegal human trafficking across our border, terrorists that come across our border, and all types of criminals that come across our border, and they're smuggled across by the cartels. And the cartels are the real threat to the United States and to the American people. We can talk about Laken Riley over and over again because our hearts are still so broken for her family. And her murder was absolutely the most unavoidable tragedy that I have witnessed probably in my entire lifetime. And so, you know, it's when there's real threats to Americans here at home, I think that is a situation to consider, of course, defending our country, because after all, the Department of Defense, that is their mission, is to defend our homeland. And I think that is a quality mission.
Are you saying that you would support the use of American military to attack cartels in Central and South America?
Well, the cartels are a criminal terrorist organization, an international organization that is responsible for killing Americans every single day with drugs that they traffic, fentanyl that comes from China. I think that's a true threat to the American people. And more importantly, let's talk about the fatigue in America on foreign wars. And I'll just go back to what President Trump is doing, literally working so hard right now. He's on phone call after phone call and involved in meeting after meeting on ending wars. And that's exactly what everyone wants to see. No one wants war. I don't want to see any war. I want to see Americans to be happy and successful and not have to deal with drama on the news in their lives every single day, or debates and arguments filling up their social media feeds. I think Americans deserve to have representatives like me and Democrats that are elected across the country to fix the problems. But Congress usually spends way too much time digging a deep hole and putting the American people in a debt we can never get out of. So I think those things are important, as well as my kids' future, their generation. Gen Z deserves a future where they have hope, not a future where they feel like it's hopeless.
And I want to end here. I just want to be really clear to make sure we get a clear answer on this, because I don't think I heard one. Would you support the use of the American military to attack cartels in Central and South America?
I think I've been very clear. I'm not sure what you don't understand.
Well, I asked you the question, and you said they're a threat, but you didn't say yes or no. Would you support that or not?
If there is a foreign organization that's killing Americans and invading our country, I think that's a better use of our military. Yes, absolutely. I think it's a better use of our military, protecting Americans on the homeland, protecting American lives, and I think that's something that most Americans agree with.
Our full conversation with Congresswoman Greene is available right now on 11 Alive Plus. You can download it and stream on your device for free. Well, there's always a lot to talk about, and this is a good time to bring in our political roundtable. Today, we have Fal Sabak, Assistant Vice President at McGuire Woods Consulting and former Executive Director of the Georgia House Democratic Caucus. And making his debut on the Georgia Vote, Republican strategist Joshua Edmonds, Vice President of the Stone Ridge Group. He's been a Senate staffer, a lobbyist, a campaign consultant. He was also the Executive Director for Georgia Life Alliance from 2018 to 2022, where he authored the first draft of Georgia's heartbeat bill. And joining us once again from the AJC, politics reporter Greg Bluestein, who is also an author and a contributor to MSNBC and NBC News. So much to talk about. It's so great to have you all here, and
thanks
for your maiden journey with us, too. Joshua, let's start with you. We just watched this interview with Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. Is this indicative of a split inside the Republican Party right now?
You know, I think it's important to take all of these sorts of comments in the context of the individual who may have plans in the future. And, you know, when you're someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, you're trying to thread the needle between being the staunch Trump advocate and surrogate and potentially wanting to run for governor in Georgia in 2026, and whether you may or may not have a Trump endorsement or that capacity to get that endorsement in Georgia being up for grabs. I think it makes it a very difficult needle to thread for Marjorie in particular. But is there a rift? Probably, largely so. In this circumstance, I think there may be larger things at play helping dictate her positions.
And Fal, from a Democrat's perspective, is this an issue, foreign policy writ large, but this Iran strike in particular, is this an issue that scrambles traditional political alliances a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, you've seen Democrats and Republicans alike kind of on both sides, either for the strike or against the strike. I mean, I think that you do kind of get everybody on the spectrum on that.
Greg, you've covered Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene for a long time. Watching that interview, what stood out to you?
Well, first, you pushed her on to give a clear answer on whether or not she supported military intervention with the drug cartels, and she bristled, right? And that is sort of part of her nature. She likes to push back on the press. She likes to kind of throw some elbows every so often, and that is part of why her voters really like her. They like that style. And if she gets in the governor's race, expect to see a lot more of that. And she's made no secret at all that she's very seriously considering a run for governor.
I want to get to, there's a big date circled on everybody's political calendar coming up at the end of the month, and I want to get there in a moment, but it's worth dwelling here on what we talk about so much because it's always evolving, is this gubernatorial race underway. Joshua, you brought it up first. There has been some rumblings, some rumors that Congresswoman Green might be thinking about getting into this race. Do you think there's some fire here too, or is it just smoke?
Well, I think, like you mentioned, the campaign disclosures, there'll be a lot to be told about how things look in that race so far once those reports come out. Another big question mark is President Trump going to endorse in this race? And if he is, why not already? And if he is or not, that may be the main factor for someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene deciding to get in. If there is going to be a Trump endorsement, you have to pivot your position to be someone who is an outsider of Georgia first while still being pro-Trump. But, whether or not he is going to, I think is going to be a huge question mark for whether or not she does jump in.
I want to ask you this question, but I want to ask it to Fal first. I want both your perspectives. For Democrats, would Democrats welcome somebody like Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is a national lightning rod? Many people adore her. Many others have deep opposition to her views. Would that be a welcome entrant into this race for Democrats to run against?
Absolutely. I mean, look, she's like what Greg said earlier. She's very popular in her district. Her district doesn't reflect the rest of Georgia. So I think if she does jump in, I think that she has an opportunity to sweep in the primary, honestly, because of her, her points and where she stands. And then from a Democratic perspective, she would be the candidate that we would want to face in the general.
We've got about 20 seconds left. Joshua, from Republicans' perspective, do you agree, or would Republicans be excited to see someone like Congresswoman Greene get into this race?
I think Republicans, as a conservative base, would be excited. The most excited person I can think of on the Republican side, Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger.
On that note, the good news is we're going to break, but we're going to have a whole lot more to discuss on the other side. Stay with us. A long-serving Metro Atlanta congressman faces a growing re-election challenge from inside his own party. State Representative Jasmine Clark is one of the latest Democrats to launch a primary challenge against incumbent Congressman David Scott. We sit down with her in this week's Sunday Conversation. You're challenging someone within your own party.
Yes.
Why?
I think that David Scott has done an excellent job in the last 22 years that he's been serving. This is not about eating our own. This is about the fact that David Scott is now in a position where he is not able to serve in the same capacity that he has been serving. He lost his ranking membership and on the Ag Committee because his Democratic colleagues in Congress did not have that confidence in him. He has not been able to show up to as many town halls, do as many community events. He is not taking media interviews. This is all happening right now in a time where people are saying, hey, we need to hear from you.
Congressman Scott has been in office for over 20 years. He's about 80 years old now. It sounds like what you're saying is you don't think he's fit to serve anymore.
I would never question someone's fitness. I will leave that up to the doctors and things like that. But what I will say is that my constituents have said, I want something different, and I would like to be that something different.
What do you think the biggest challenge facing the country is right now?
I think we have a lot of challenges, and so it's hard to come up with the biggest. But if I were to try to whittle it down to a couple of key things, first of all, right now in our country, we have a crisis of health care. It is way too expensive. And right now we have people in office, unfortunately, in the majority, that do not see the value in making sure that we have a healthy society.
One of the issues we hear about the most is cost of living. If you're elected, what will you do to ease the cost of living burden that so many families in Georgia and around the country are struggling with right now?
So let's start with the fact that we have a budget out there that wants to take away SNAP benefits. And someone might say, well, I don't have SNAP benefits. I don't even know what those are. But that does impact so many other things. It impacts our farmers. It impacts school lunches. It impacts other parts of our lives. Not just that. When we talk about cost of living, let's talk about the cost of actually owning a home, getting a home, buying a home. We have corporate landlords that are basically these investment groups that buy up all the properties, basically boxing out any regular individual family that just wants to go and buy their first home or maybe buy their second home. They are not able to compete with these investment groups. They end up being boxed out of that process to where homes are unaffordable. At the end of the day, we need to be looking for policies that make it easier for people to purchase their own home.
Now, we reached out to Congressman Scott 4 times this week, inviting him to respond to Clark's claims. He never got back to us. Our full interview with Representative Clark is available right now on 11 Alive Plus. And now we turn once again to our political roundtable of experts. So much to discuss here. We're coming out of this interview with State Representative Jasmine Clark. Greg, the 13th, the Democratic primary for this district is already filling up. What stands out to you right now?
Yeah, there's already 3 formidable Democratic challengers to Congressman Scott who just turned 80. And it's going to be a generational challenge, right? There's a lot of Democrats who are upset with the way the status quo is fighting, and they want more aggressive confrontational approaches. And you're hearing that from Representative Clark, but you're also going to hear that from other challengers. The question is whether it will be enough to beat back an incumbent who has staved off challenges before with the power of that I next to his name.
Incumbency, the advantages are substantial in name recognition and in fundraising, just to name a few. Val, is this an issue, a race that is tricky for Democrats, that pits somebody who has been a real stalwart of the party for decades in Congressman Scott against this rising tide of younger Democrats?
I don't think it's like a pit against. I think, kind of going back to what Greg was saying, I think certain people in the party, they want something different. They see a different vision for the party in the future, especially now we're in a second President Trump term. They see that they need, the status quo isn't working. And so they want to be able to do something different. So I think it's kind of a, maybe a little bit of tension to see where the future of the party needs to go.
Let's shift gears here. Let's talk about money, which is something that we talk about a lot when we're talking about politics, for better and maybe for worse. Joshua, big date on the calendar coming up at the end of the month, June 30th. Why is this date so important?
I mean, in a lot of ways, the ability and sustainability of a campaign statewide and at the federal level to truly be formidable is going to be dictated by how much money they're raising, especially in this first reporting period.
And that happens on June 30th. That's when you've got to reveal, this is how much my campaign took in this period.
Sure, and your ability to signal to major donors and grassroots supporters, I'm the real deal, I'm not carpetbagging or trying to buy my way into a political seat. I have the capability to be a serious candidate. And this report is going to speak volumes to that in most of these races.
Greg, what are you watching for? What candidates maybe who are not into these races for Senate, or I should say for governor, for lieutenant governor, AG, what are they looking for coming from the candidates who are in these races? And then for the candidates who are announced, what's the pressure like on them to put up a big number?
Well, there's so much we're watching for. On the Republican side of the governor's race, Attorney General Chris Carr has a huge head start. He got in the race way back in November. What's he doing with that time? He hasn't been doing that many campaign events, at least public events, but how is he using that time? He's trying to raise as much as he can. Huge test for Jason Estevez, Keisha Lance Bottoms, Derek Jackson, the 3 main Democrats in that race. Also watching the Senate race, because Governor Kemp has told his major donors, hold your fire, keep your powder dry. So how is Buddy Carter and John King, how are they doing in the face of that challenge from Kemp saying, we're not necessarily, I'm not necessarily supporting these 2 yet.
So much going on in Georgia politics. We could keep talking here. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. Guys, thank you as always. The Georgia Vote will continue right after this. Welcome back. The CDC's revamped Vaccine Advisory Committee met for the first time this week after Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. fired its former members earlier this month. The group plans to start looking into vaccines that have been approved for decades. This was a 2-day affair in Atlanta on Wednesday and Thursday. During the meeting, the committee chair announced 2 work groups, one that would reevaluate vaccines that have not been evaluated in more than 7 years, like the shot for hepatitis B. And a second group will look into the recommended childhood vaccines. At the same time, outside the CDC, a group of advocates protested the new panel and the choices it is making, some dressed as pathogens to symbolize the things that vaccines fight. Now, the vaccine advisors endorsed this fall's flu vaccinations for just about every American, but only if the shots are free of a rarely used preservative, an ingredient called thimerosal, which anti-vaccine groups claim is tied to autism. That link, though, has never been proven in a medical research setting. Up next, this Metro Atlanta veteran dealt with heartbreaking loss, but now he hopes to heal others through his music. Our Voice of the Voter is coming up next. This week's Voice of the Voter takes us to Roswell. Scott Pryor is a veteran on a mission to heal through the power of music and community. As Faith Jesse discovers, he's hoping his story of loss will inspire others to connect.
Let's go, let's rock and roll. My name is Scott Pryor, and I'm a musician, and I have the Scott Pryor Band.
Where did the love for music start for you?
Sure. My love for music started, as far back as I can remember. My father was a honky-tonk musician. It was just a very regular thing watching my dad play piano and again, the effect that he would have on people. And they'd just like, play another song, play another song. So when I was a senior in high school, I decided to go in the Marine Corps. I went right in. Turned 18 in boot camp at Camp Pendleton. Once I was actually a practicing attorney and I went back in the Marine Corps. And I was like, what are you doing? But I'm like, I love it. And anyone who served in the military and has gotten out, typically they miss, you just miss the camaraderie, you miss the fighting and living for a higher purpose.
How do you feel like as a veteran now, the treatment of veterans, and how could it be treated better when it comes to programs?
We have multiple songs addressing what veterans are going through. I think there's certainly not enough help out there for veterans. There are so many veterans who are suffering. I am optimistic, though, that things will get better, but I never want to point to an outside source and say, well, they need to make it better. I say, what can I do? It's my responsibility. I'm a veteran. What can I do to help? One of the big problems in the world is I think that people feel isolated. I think we need to be more connected with each other as a people and not be so divided or so isolated.
Isolation with veterans drives depression, and unfortunately sometimes that results in suicide. I know that you have a personal experience with that. Can you talk to us about it?
Sure. My son was Elijah. Elijah Pryor, he was very, just a great kid. He was tall, he was strikingly handsome. He just had a huge heart, and he loved people. The first album is called Wide Awake, and that's the story, basically, of my son's death. I know he felt alone. He just felt alone. He lived by himself, and he was just going through some tough moments. As a parent, we felt like we were maybe sleeping a little bit. Not that we were, but we just weren't as aware as we should be. And I think that music can reach around, and it can hold somebody and help them through those hard times. And that's certainly the goal with our music, is just to let people, hey, you're not alone. We love you, we care about you, other people love you, and people need you. People need you, community. People need you.
Such an important message. People need you. So important. We thank you all for watching us today, and we hope to see you right back here again next Sunday at 11 for another edition of the Georgia Vote.